All right, you listened to, you were watching all of that count by the Minister of Finance, giving the breakdown, billions, billions. But the point there is, in all of those billions, they are not as billioning as they used to be in the past. So there's a lot of decline there when you measure the figures comparative to how things used to be. We have an economist with us in the studio to talk about this. We have Ike Nwosu joining us right now. Good morning. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, and we have Muda Yusuf, Director General of LCCI, also Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joining us on phone. Muda, it's good to have you join us on phone. Good morning. Okay, the lines just went off, but we have him back on. Now, let's start it this way. The government at this time, we know that the difficult terrain or the difficult situation government is in now, and it's affecting everyone. But the question Nigerians are asking is, it is taking so long, and they don't seem to be the light at the end of the tunnel.
It's a difficult situation we find ourselves in. The situation is multi-dimensional, really. Check out the situation. First of all, you have a 90 billion naira deficit between last month, August and September. And when you look at the whole scenario, the Sokoto State Governor is calling for a review of the revenue sharing formula. He wants more to come to state.
Yes.
And the question is, what is the report card of states on the amount you've collected since? Because many of you, your colleagues, have done 3 bailouts from the CBN.
Exactly.
It is expected that you should have deductions from your monthly allocation because that's a modus of repayment. Yeah. So now you have more drop in revenue. There's less to share. And yet there will still be deduction from your revenue for the loans you took. Are you, state governors, still going to come cap in hand, begging the national? What is the originality of your own revenue, IGR, internal revenue generation schemes at the domestic level? So a lot of things beg the question when you look at the whole scenario. And many people are not even focusing on the local government, the third tier of government. Because in the UK, for instance, the mayor of London does a lot of IGR, fundraising. He's a mayor like any other local government chairman. So I haven't heard of any local government chairman that has stood out as being distinguished or distinctive in fundraising. So they too need to raise funds at their own level because we seem not to be putting enough pressure on them for their own responsibility in governmental role.
Maybe that's how the state governors want it to be.
To be, perhaps. So maybe when the National Assembly makes the constitutional amendment to get local government funds direct to them, I don't know, maybe we'll see a difference. But like I asked at the level of the governors, what have the local government chairmen done with what they have received? Whatever is left of it when the governors take what they want to take. So, at the federal level as well, there was a retreat held recently by the Minister of Finance with, I think, her colleagues at the state level and the FIRS. Now, the purpose of that retreat, I think that was two weeks back, to look at how to generate new revenue to shore up the shortfall. Because the shortfall is significant. Look, there's a dramatic increase in oil prices. Yet, we have a deficit because 1.15 billion barrels of oil are shorting due to the Niger Delta problem. You have Bonny Terminal declaring force majeure. You have Forcados Terminal declaring force majeure. You've got several other pipeline issues, shut-ins, shutdowns, revenue is dropping. So, Aliko Dangote is announcing, I'm going to start using coal to power my cement plants because gas supply is no longer guaranteed in the Niger Delta due to the problem in the Niger Delta. Because if he doesn't get enough gas supply for powering, then his production drops and the revenue from his own organization drops.
All right.
So at the end of the day, the question is, what is the outcome of the conversation between the minister and her colleagues at the state level and the FIRS. We don't have a proper communicator to say these are the original ideas we have in order to shore up revenue.
Okay, let's bring Muda in here. I think what you are actually talking about is the tax regime, how to harness what we have and generate more revenue. But I also remember that last month or so, between 2 months from, the month of July, August, the month of July and August, they were able to make a little bit more appreciable gains due to tax collection. Between now and then, what gave Amuda Yusuf?
Well, good morning, everyone. The challenges are what Dr. Nwosu has very well articulated. There are 3 major sources. We have the oil revenue, which is determined by the price and the output. We know what the price is. It has been low over time. And we know what the situation with output is because of the attacks on the Niger Delta, attacks on the pipelines and all of that. So clearly that has had a major impact on revenue. We have not been able to fix that, and I'm hoping that with the engagement that the federal government is having with the militants, with the elders, the stakeholders in the Niger Delta, we are hoping that some positive outcomes will come from that. Because unless we have that, it will be very difficult to push forward significantly with regard to oil revenue. So that is one major factor. The other major factor has to do with the well-being of businesses. The tax revenue that you collect from businesses, from individuals, is a function of how healthy those enterprises, those businesses are. Not many businesses are healthy at this time because of the challenges of the infrastructure, the challenges of foreign exchange scarcity, and more importantly, the challenges of uncertainty and investors' confidence in the economy. For as long as you have that, it will be very difficult for businesses to prosper. And if businesses are not prospering,
they can't pay taxes.
You can't get tax. You can only give what you have. You tax profits. So the well-being of businesses also is affecting the amount of revenue. So we need to address those factors, those variables that are impacting on investors' confidence in this economy. Some of them are policy variables, some of them are institutional, some of them have to do with infrastructure. I heard Dr. Nwosu talk about gas. You can't power an economy if you don't have energy. And if business don't have energy, how will they perform? The cost of energy in this economy is still very high. So that is another major issue. Then customs revenue is another major source of revenue. Now, because of the policies around the foreign exchange regime, because of the scarcity of foreign exchange, because of the exchange rate depreciation, and because of some policies such as the automobile policy, import volumes have dropped significantly. And for as long as import volumes continue to drop, for so long will import and customs revenue be impacted. So customs revenue also has been on the decline because of the challenges of importation around foreign exchange scarcity, around foreign exchange volatility, around the uncertainty in the economy, and around so many other factors in the maritime sector. Dr. Nwosu will tell you all the challenges that the maritime sector players are facing. And all these things are affecting revenue. So these are the segments that we need to look at. We are talking about revenue. Of course, tax is good. Again, efficiency of tax collection at the level of the state and so on. But FIRS is trying. But you can only give what people can offer. So these are my perspectives on the issue of revenue, the decline, and the factors responsible for the decline.
Okay, Muda, thank you. We'll come back to you shortly. He talked about, Dr. Nwos, I'm asking you this now. He talked about the issue of the policy, some are institutional challenges, some are issues of infrastructure. But if government, because government is the superstructure, government is the big brother of the whole economy, and when it comes to seeing where there is a challenge and then see how we can handle this and all of that, they have the powers to do that. They have the authority to do that. But what seemed to be the challenge in ensuring that the tide changes as it is? Because we have been in this for some time. What seemed to be the challenge in kickstarting?
The government was not listening.
All right.
I remember about 3 months ago, Laulu Akonde, the chief press secretary to the vice president, who is in charge of the economy, came out to announce that the responsibility for running the economy is that of government. So government sees no reason why they should involve the private sector in the federal government's economic management team. 2 months after that statement, Kemi Adoshi was on television telling us that we are in recession and that by October, if things don't change, we will not be able to pay salaries. And I was asking myself, you're not the Minister of Finance. You are telling us things are going to happen. You should be telling us what are the palliatives to turn the things around. I turned off my television. Then they now go helter-skelter, calling for a retreat, where they invited the organized private sector, MAN, NESG, LTTI, the whole OPS, NASIMA, now asking for our input for resolving the problems and turning the economy around. And we told, well, we thought you guys were on your high horse. You knew it all. So there is this, that Messiah attitude that we know it all has to change. Even in the US and in the UK, they have, Obama has a council of economic advisors. He doesn't know it all, neither does his minister. Even in the United Kingdom, the British had to swallow their pride and go and get a Canadian to be the governor of the central bank. My Carney, as of today. Because they didn't find the British man good enough to handle the position. Because Canada was the only major G7 country that was not affected by the global crisis. So where you need help, you get the help. It's been, I like what my colleague Muda said, policy issues are primary. When you say what's the role of government, I don't know who gave them that advice on their foreign exchange policy. The private sector has screamed itself that this is wrong. How many airlines have stopped? 2 have stopped completely. United Airlines, I think, was the first to go. Last week, Emirates and Kenya Airways announced we're not going to fly to Abuja anymore. Do you know the amount of revenue government gets from airlines? And yet you have over 600 billion of their money tied down over the past 1.5 years. They can't remit it. And at the time they wanted to remit it, the foreign exchange value was a certain amount. Now look at what it is, and they're asking for a special window. So your foreign exchange policy must change immediately. That's one. Secondly, your so-called Presidential Committee on Ease of Doing Business, which I personally think is a duplication of the National Competitiveness Council of Nigeria, because that's what they're supposed to be doing, has to be given immediate terms of reference to start work immediately with KPIs that will be achieved within 3 weeks. Thirdly, all the access roads to every single seaport in this country and airport, none is optimal, including Abuja Airport. The road to it. Because you have all the stoppages here and there with a lot of accidents that I cannot even find that happen in other countries. None is optimal, and yet that's where the second highest revenue comes from in the country. Apapa Port today is not accessible. That I think. So these are immediate low-hanging fruits that you must do immediately. Change the forest policy.
Okay, Doctor, we'll come back to you. But we need to go out now on TVC Entertainment. But our viewers there can continue with TVC Breakfast on Concert Channel 190, DSTV 418.
You can also follow the program on GoTV Channel 45 and ACTV 510. So you can tune in if you're going out on TVC Entertainment. Let's go on with the discussion right now. Right, if you just tuned in, you're watching TVC Breakfast, and on this segment we are discussing the declining federal allocation to states and the implications thereof. And we have two economists with us in the studio who have been monitoring the situation, who have been also advising government at different levels, as the case may be. We have Dr. Ikenna Nwosu with us in the studio. We've been doing justice to this. And we also have on phone Muda Yusuf, the Director General of LCCI. Now, you were making a point earlier on before we went on break.
Yes, the major policy that needs to shift is the forest policy.
Okay.
And it has to happen immediately because many companies are dropping off because they have no foreign exchange to operate. You go to the seaport, as Muda had said, it's a snowball effect. You get to the seaport, there's a 75% drop in cargo in throughput. Why? There's no forest import. You go there, you see security men by 6 o'clock, they draw 2 football fields and play football on the space where you should have containers. Many shipping lines have closed and left as airlines are closing to go. And the government is sitting and folding his hands. The IMF managing director screamed and screamed and screamed. So between January and April, she came here in January, and at the beginning of the year to enable government to change their policy and announce. You need to get this policy off. The government only shifted a little to say, okay, you can do some remittance out of the country. So if you find a lot of companies that are saying, well, foreign business, as far as we are concerned, if we can't take our money out, there's no way we're going to bring it in the first place. So a lot of FIDs, final investment decisions, are on hold. While that is for new business. While those who are already here are saying, no, we need to get out. Now, when you look at the number of foreigners who are also living from the oil industry, because there's no operation going there, it comes to the second issue of policy. The government's policy of engagement with the Niger Delta militants, I think it's flawed. You are doing the right thing at the wrong time. You shouldn't start by provoking. You have an amnesty program, and this is not supposed to stop at a certain time. Look at the situation and look at what are the policy considerations that the last government, even if it's from another political party, but government is continuous. What are the policy considerations for having the amnesty stop at a certain time of extending it? Now, you come in and you say, no, I'm going to hit you guys. What do you get? Hostilities. So you need to tweak that policy a little so that you can have more oil production coming and get the benefits of the rise in oil prices. Otherwise, our current recession is going to get into depression. Then we're in bigger trouble.
All right, Muda Yusuf, you're still there. Let's talk about the states now with this mega, perhaps, stipend that they have gotten, and that, of course, will take us down to the local government area. What do you think will happen now? Another bailout?
Well, before I go into the issue of the state, let me just underscore some of the points that have been made by Dr. Nwosu. First of all, we need to quickly create an environment that will enable private capital to come into this economy. Because of the fiscal situation of the government, because of the declining revenue, there's a limit to which the government can fix, particularly infrastructure. And infrastructure is very critical to economic recovery. Therefore, rather than even be talking about borrowing, we should be putting private sector investors in our infrastructure space. So we need to quickly look at whatever laws are hindering or impeding the inflow of private sector capital to the economy, so that we can fix or fix this infrastructure gap. Be it in power, be it in roads, be it in railways. There are legislative issues, there are policy issues that need to be addressed. That is very important because we need to complement government resources with private sector capital. The private sector capital can be from within the economy or from outside the economy. That is very, very important. Then I also need to underscore the point of investors' confidence. It is investors that make things happen in an economy. It is investors that create jobs. It is investors that bring in the foreign exchange. Even at the best of times, the CBN was only, funding the forex market to the tune of maybe 50% at the best of times. Now, because of the decline in investors' confidence and because of the liquidity problem we have been having in the forex market, the CBN is now being left almost to shoulder the entire responsibility alone. And that is not practical. It is not possible. There's no way the CBN alone can fund successfully the foreign exchange market. So we need to review our foreign exchange policy to liberalize inflows of foreign exchange into this economy. We should liberalize inflows for those who have export proceeds to bring the proceeds freely into this economy. We should liberalize inflows for those who have capital importation that they want to bring into this economy. We should liberalize inflows for remittances into this economy. We should not be imposing rates on those who want to bring in funds into the economy. So that is what I mean by liberalizing the inflows. If you have that, that will help to show up and boost the supply side of the foreign exchange market. So having said that, you talked about the state. Well, I don't know how we can continue with the bailout, but what I think needs to be done is for the state also to talk to the reality. Because if you have a resource constraint, you have a financial constraint, one of the things you could do is to increase your revenue. And if you cannot increase your revenue, you have to reduce your cost. That is the only way you can ensure a sustainable and enduring system. So if it needs to be clear to the state that, well, this revenue can no longer be what it is, then there has to be a way to reduce costs. That personnel costs or overhead costs or whatever costs they need to review. And they also need to look at leakages. Even as bad as things are, there are 6 states where there are quite a number of leakages that are still not being addressed. So I think guys need to look critically at the cost of governance at the state level, at the local government level. I know that the governments have been worrying about the fact that, okay, they don't want to lay off workers, they don't want to do this. But some of these things are becoming inevitable. If you don't have the revenue, then you have to reduce your costs. Otherwise, what you have is continuous accumulation of arrears, of debts either to contractors or to workers. So these realities, I think some of the states and the local government need to face up to it.
All right.
Because there is a limit to which you can continue to bail out the local government.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to you, Dr. Mosu. The issue of bailout for states. Some of the states, most of the states, or many states, let me say, in fact, most of the states got bailout at that time. Many of them have not been able to completely pay off the bail funds they got. Now, if they call for a bailout now, for instance, what will be the implication in the long run, apart from not being able to pay salaries? Because the point there is, I know that for a state like Benue State, for instance, is not able to conduct local government election because the funds are not there. And the same goes for so many other states. What would be the cumulative impact of the bailout and another bailout, and then certainly you're struggling to pay back?
I'm a lawyer by profession, as well as being an economist. Now, I had made this proposition at some event before. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria states clearly that it's a federation. And it states that where there is a state of emergency, the federal government can take over the administration of a state. That state of emergency is not limited to physical state of emergency where there are hostilities. If there is a financial state of emergency and the state government is not able to run its government, the federal government will go and take over the place. It's purely legal. A lot of governors have not thought about this. So if you've taken the first bailout, second, third, now you want the fourth, then it gets to the glaring realization of government, that federal government, that you are not able to run your state financially. It's a financial emergency. They have to go and take over. In the US, the government has done that. State governments have taken over local governments when they found that they
Some have actually bantered that some states can be merged. Some states that are functional and
Very
viable
correct.
can be merged with the ones that are quote unquote bankrupt.
Thank you. So that's what will be the, not short, but medium term impact of continuous bailouts if they're not able to. It dovetails to what I said at the beginning. What is the originality of thought of state governments in IGR? Lagos state government has led the pack at the time when they had their revenue held back under Obasanjo's regime, and they did very well. Tinubu came up with innovation. What are other states doing? Some of them I know are encouraging, creating an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive, but it's not enough. You need to be more regional. Get in people, have conferences, let people bring in original ideas, and not go in every 28 days, cap in hand, to the center asking for money. So if you cannot be original, then get off the seat and let somebody else take the position.
But what can be immediate? Because we know that most of the states, they get their revenue from taxes. And if they can no longer pay the salaries of the workers who pay these taxes, where do they get immediate revenue from?
Well, let me start by what my colleague said, Muda. Reduce the cost of governance in your states. That's plug the leakages first. Then you will see your balance sheet better. 2, be more proactive in creating an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. Because it is the private sector that will tax for revenue. I'll give you a simple example. Nigerian breweries wanted to establish their factory at Enugu now, Ama Brewery, which to date is the largest in Africa, 40 billion. They wanted to establish it in the southeast. They went to 5 of the southeast states. The governors at that time, many of them were asking for payment for land. Chimaroke Nnamani now said, free land to you in Enugu State, because he knows the roller coaster effect and the localization of industry that will occur. And he gave them free land at Ama Brewery. Look at what has happened. That place now has become a hub for the beverage industry. You've got Pepsi, you've got Guinness, you've got 7-Up and Co, everything there. With the transport and all the localization of industry that have come up. So he created an enabling environment in that regard. Now, other states should come up with similar policies. For instance, I hear Ebonyi State is saying 1 individual, 1 hectare for agriculture.
They're banning the consumption of foreign rice.
Of foreign rice. Come up with something original that is going to benefit your state and make it easy for people to come and invest. And the governors, because it's the private sector that has been screaming about the foreign exchange policy. The governors under the governors forum should go and put pressure on the president to change that forest policy, because no matter how conducive your local economy is, no foreign investor is going to come in when the federal government's forest policy is just nothing. So the governors who have more leverage with the presidency should go out there and put the pressure on him to do that. Now, why I say that the situation is graver than we think. You see, we're talking of the 3 tiers of government, federal, state, local. We're not talking of the 3 arms.
Is the president the problem? Because we've heard at some point where the president will say they think he's a problem of Nigeria's economy. And sometimes even the economist talks over and above his head. Who do you think is a stumbling block here?
Well,
those who advise, those who make, will the government, the president on his own come up with this, the foreign exchange policy we are in right now, do you think?
Without being advised
by some economist somewhere?
Well, the economy has been in reverse gear. There's a vice president who is in charge of the economy. We've been talking to him on the private sector level. Who runs the country? Who is in charge? The president. The buck stops on his table, whatever his vice does. Who does the forest policy? Central Bank of Nigeria. We've been talking to the central bank governor, the organized private sector, and he's sticking with what he's doing. So at the end of the day, vice president, CBN governor, finance minister, all of them are under the president. The president takes the buck. When he goes to Germany and other countries, when the IMF comes, they're not talking to his subordinates. They're talking to him. So if we've been in reverse gear all this time, if the National Assembly is not well funded, if the National Assembly staff who run over 1,000 could demonstrate last week that they're not funded, government is almost getting to a shut-in. You are having a situation where you may not be able to pay salaries by end of October, November, as the finance minister has said. Airlines are leaving, oil companies are leaving, maritime shipping lines are leaving. The financial situation in the country is dropping. Banks are not doing financial intermediation. They are dropping off staff. Many companies' balance sheets are in the negative. I'm rolling out the impact.
Yes.
Then you are telling me I should be talking to subordinates? What is the president's job? He better get to do his job, because if the situation gets worse, then you're going to see what we had in the Arab countries. There'll be social uprising. Guys are hungry. That's just the bottom line, because the number of people who are out of job, who were in jobs and are out of job as an impact of all the government policies, is very, very, very alarming. Take it from me.
Let's bring Muda in here. I'd like Muda to respond to what you said. But before that, you realize that at the beginning of the year, when the excuse me, when IMF reports came out, the forecast for Nigerian economy wasn't that rosy. But just lately, there was a report now that says, okay, Nigeria's economy now is taking the place of that of South Africa. It's higher, bigger now. It's more stable than that of South Africa. And the government officials are cashing in on that, perhaps papering the crack, not telling those who need to know the truth. Now, from what Ikenna just spoke about now, the buck stops at the president's table. Perhaps it has the report of the IMF now to say, okay, everything is well. And it's not really well.
Well, let me take it from the level of the issue of the states. First of all, let me say that there is a need to review the revenue allocation formula. Because right now, the states and the local governments are at a great disadvantage when it comes to revenue allocation. So it's a situation where the states and local governments will be grappling with 48%, while the federal government is taking 52%. And when you look at what the responsibilities are and the impact of the responsibilities on the welfare of the people, the states and local governments have much bigger responsibility that directly impacts on the welfare of the people. So at the legislative level, I think there's been some discussion around that up until this point. I think we need to move fast on those discussions and see how we can redistribute the federal allocation in a way that is more equitable, in a way that it puts more revenue in the hands of the state and the local government. That is one. Secondly, we need to also look at the issue of fiscal federalism. There is too much concentration of responsibilities at the federal level. I mean, take solid minerals, for instance, or to take even other natural resources. The royalty, the rent, the taxes, company taxes that are paid, everything is going to the central pool. The only thing the state can get from these solid minerals explored in the state is just perhaps the pay paid by the workers. And how much is that? How much will that come to? If as a state you are able to attract a factory or an investor to your state to set up a business, the company price that is paid is going to the center. The VAT that is paid is going to the center. The education tax that is paid is going to the center. The import duty that is paid is going to the center. The excise duty that is paid is going to the center. So what is the state getting? Just pay. And how much are factory workers getting? So the incentives for the states to also drive investment is not there. So we need to look at this and make this country a proper federation, a proper federal structure. That is very important. If you must move all this conversation forward and have an economy that is sustainable. This is an opportunity to look at some fundamental issues so that you can move on. Now, coming back to what you said about the IMF and the fact that whether Nigeria is not the largest economy and the rest of them. Well, that is fine. But what matters to the average Nigerian at this time is jobs, is investors' confidence, is stability in the foreign exchange market, predictability in foreign exchange market, return of purchasing power. These are the things that matter. Whether we are the largest economy or not, it is neither here nor there. That is just a matter of, it is good for perception. But what is most critical is that we want an economy where things work, where you have energy to power the economy, where you have interest rates that people can do business with. Not interest rate that is 25% or 30%. Where the macroeconomy is stable, where infrastructure work, and where you have an environment that investors can come with ease, put in their money, and they are confident that any time they are ready to either leave, they'll be able to repatriate their funds, whichever way. So these are the more fundamental issues. The fact is, the Nigerian economy is still a big economy. The fundamentals of this economy is still very strong, given our size, given our resources, and given the fact that Nigerians are generally very enterprising people. Perhaps one of the most enterprising in the whole world. What we need is an enabling environment. You can see, in spite of all that is happening, people are still struggling to make things work on their own. So it's a question of just removing some of these constraints, impediments on the way of our entrepreneurs, in terms of the infrastructure environment, the security environment, the financial infrastructure, the policy environment, the liquidity in the foreign exchange market. These are the things. Once we're able to get all the things out of the way, Nigerians will make things happen. So the economy still has that potential to be what it is destined to be. It's still a big economy by all standards. But we need to get a few things right.
All right, Muda, thank you. We'll come back to you. Dr. Nwosu, let me ask you this. Now, remember that earlier in the year, the president came out to say that monies that has been recovered from blocking the loopholes of the TSA and monies recovered so far from corruption at that time amounted over #1 trillion, as the case may be. Now, if we put into perspective, if that money is somewhere, for instance, if all the money, because since that time until now, there's been recovered loot here and there, if that money is kept somewhere, maybe it's still far away somewhere, I don't know, but what role can that money play in the scheme of things right now?
The Minister of Information and the Vice President, the Minister of Information at the press conference and the Vice President at the Nigerian Economic Summit 2 weeks back, both concord that the deficit in the budget, in the federal budget, one of the sources of funding that deficit for which provision was made at the budgeting stage by the planning ministry is the receipt of funds that were stolen. And that's why you see the federal government pushing the anti-corruption.
But why is our
agencies.
debt profile climbing then? If
That's a
this
very
money is
important
being used, then why is the debt profile climbing?
That's an important question, because I think what happens is they think that they're not recovering the monies as quickly as they expect. So they need to make up the shortfall to fund the budget, because already they're discussing 2017 budget. They're discussing with the IMF about a possible loan. Kemi Adeosun said so. They're launching a $1 billion Eurobond. I think it's this week or next week. So they need to, as far as they're concerned, they need to fund the budget quickly, the deficit, in order to achieve what are their KPIs under the medium-term economic framework. Now, and you find the president at any point in time he goes overseas, talking to the presidents. We have so money in your country, we need it back. When Cameron was there, said Nigeria is fantastically corrupt. The president said, yeah, we're fantastically corrupt, but return our monies with you. So I understand their need to get in monies as quickly as possible. There are legal processes stalling them. The Attorney General is doing his best. But they ought to have made provision for the fact that those monies may not come in as quickly, because they have a justice ministry that should advise them that this money may not come as quickly. And then they will now balance the issue of, if you're taking loans, what are the interests, unless they're non-interest loans, how do you balance it out to the monies you're going to recover? knowing that 2019 is around the corner. Some of these monies may not be recovered as quickly if you have long court cases. You get my point? So now you're going to move the deficit from one year into another, year
and with
on
the
year.
zero budgeting system,
That's a problem. So it brings me back to what my colleague said, originality of thought. Now, truly, the revenue allocation formula now is skewed against states. So there's not enough incentive for state governments to bring in investment to their state because all they get is basically payee and some of the minor permit fees and all that. So that needs to be restructured. And then it brings you to the issue of the revenue mobilization, allocation, and fiscal commission. See the first word, the revenue mobilization. Most of what I see them do is allocation.
Yeah.
What are they doing to mobilize revenue? We should be seeing them working more closely with revenue generating agencies of government. So I expect that they should be having a retreat. Get your colleagues from other countries in the world to come and give you share experience, to bring in new ideas on how to mobilize revenue. The Senate is so concerned about the situation that 2 weeks back, they debated the economy, and I've written the president to come and have a conversation with them on the matter. Pick a date. We're waiting for that. That tells you how concerned they are. In all of this, I haven't had the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission say something substantial at all. Then, you now come to the issue of the maritime sector. Customs revenue, customs definitely is not meeting its target this year. When people are not importing, where are you going to get the revenue to meet up? So, what are the innovations that Nigerian Customs Service is going to do? What are the incentives that are going to drive more business, importation, or even export? Because the government is talking about diversifying the economy through exports. Incidentally, exports are taxed at zero. So there's no revenue coming in from export for government, except the foreign exchange that comes in. Of course, the money belongs to the private sector. But you take your normal company's income tax. Yeah, but now the government has left export at zero in order to encourage it. I hope they're not tinkering with the idea of introducing duty on it, because that would be too much. Then more fundamentally, even if all these policy considerations are taken into effect, are taken into consideration and put into effect, there is one major fundamental distortion in this economy. The private sector, both organized and unorganized, at the level of MSMEs, are substantially and critically underfunded. Critically. I moderated a session at the Economic Summit where somebody from the Development Finance Department of the CBN made it very clear to us that they have seen the gap, funding gap. The ordinary man on the street, small entrepreneurs, startups, or step-up companies, are fundamentally seeking finance to move forward. It is not getting to them from the commercial bank. Because the commercial banks,
the credits that's meant to come even from the central bank, it's not enough, really.
It's not enough. The central bank's 550 billion MSME funding, housed in Nexen, is not reaching the people. There's not enough advocacy about it. What are the accessing terms? Then, the normal funds of the banks, the commercial banks, CBN admitted, are not structured for small and medium enterprises lending. So the CBN said that they now did, and there is a regulatory framework challenge. And that challenge is that the CBN needs to be allowed to lend directly to the private sector. So all this put together, the CBN has to replicate what they did in agriculture, the NISRAL and the Anchor Borrower program, with other aspects of MSMEs, particularly solid minerals, because solid minerals is another revenue generating part of this country which we have not sufficiently exploited. So that's my take on how to gather more.
We're wrapping up this session, but just a quick question. There's a call for cabinet reshuffle, perhaps even in the economic summit. Some have said the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Budget should go. Can you just quickly respond to that in 10 seconds?
the president has to make his decision based on his balance sheets.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ikenangosu, for joining us on the program. And Muda Yusuf, thank you very much for talking to us on TVC Breakfast.